Have any of you ever attended a Passover Seder? A couple of you? The Passover Seder, for those of you who may not have attended one, is one of the foundational events in Jewish life. Now, Maxwell House figured this out years and years and years ago and started publishing a Haggadah, an order of service for a Passover Seder, so that families sitting around the table could tell the ancient stories and sing songs and have a time of sacred remembrance for God's deeds on behalf of the Jewish people, delivering them from slavery. Now, one of the things that you learn very quickly if you ever attend a Seder is that it is not a quick event. A Seder will go for 2 hours, 3 hours, as people tell the story and ask the questions. There's a sense of leisureliness to the meal. But that first Passover, the one written of in Exodus, was anything but leisurely. It was indeed a meal of haste, a meal of preparation. It was sort of the equivalent of slapping together a peanut butter sandwich and throwing it in your lunchbox so that you could eat on the road. After all, the commandment was to take a lamb and roast it with its head and its legs and its inner organs still inside. In other words, don't even slow down enough to butcher it properly. And then eat it with your loins girded. Yeah, we don't gird our loins so much, but fully ready to go, with your sandals on your feet and your staff in your hand. Because tonight is the night that God is going to set the people free. And so ever since that night, the Passover has been a meal observed by the Jewish people in honor of that holy event. That was the meal that Jesus celebrated with his disciples as they gathered on that night before his arrest. It was the Passover that they shared together, breaking the bread and telling the story of how God had brought the people from slavery to freedom. And in doing so, Jesus and his followers were part of a long history of faith. And that night, as Jesus broke the bread and gave it to his followers, telling them, "This is my body broken for you," he wasn't getting rid of the Passover celebration, but he was adding yet another layer to it. We do well to remember that when we Christians gather at the table with the bread and the wine that the Hebrew people have used for millennia. The Apostle Paul was writing to the church in Rome at a time when everything was up in the air, when Christians were beginning to become a separate sect of Judaism, but before it had become a fully separate religion. And as he wrote about love. Now these are words that, it's not, the 1 Corinthians, love is patient, love is kind, that we love to read at weddings, but this is the kind of love that, he needed to remind the church of. He reminds them of those rules that have always guided their lives. You shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet. These indeed are the words that, as people coming out of the tradition of Judaism, they've long known. boils it down, he sums it up saying, all of these commandments essentially mean that you are called to love your neighbor as yourself. For love does no wrong to a neighbor, and therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. Eugene Peterson, in his translation, phrases it this way: you can't go wrong when you love others. When you add up everything that is in the law code, the sum total is love. Isn't that beautiful? When you add up everything in the law code, the sum total is love. I'm so glad that Paul gave these words of advice to the Church of Jesus Christ. Those words are the reason that for the past 2,000 years, Christians have been able to live at perfect peace with their neighbors. That's why, since Paul wrote these words to the Roman Church, all congregations have been able to do the work of Christ without any conflict or dissent. Right? No? So next you're going to tell me that those words aren't how you as a congregation have been able to go 175 years without any conflict? No? Well, heck, there goes my sermon. No, maybe not. Maybe those words given to the church in Rome have echoed down across the years to us as an ideal, as something for which we can hope and aspire and strive, but perhaps they're also something that have been honored in the breach as much as in the observance. We all know the truth, that since the beginning, Christianity has been at war with its neighbors, sometimes due to the neighbors, often due to us. We know that our sense of pride, our sense that God has chosen us as the new chosen ones, lasted until the Holocaust, when we had to go back and rethink that pride and hubris that we carried. We look back at the Protestant Reformation and at our Congregationalist ancestors' arrival in the New World. And we always tell the story of these people moving bravely forward, but we always forget that behind that is a story of people who simply couldn't get along with those folks back home. I don't know the story of this congregation, but I'd be willing to bet that there have been many church fights. And that maybe those splits were more about personality and pride, more than they were about faithfulness. Right? Yeah. If there's one thing that we can say about people and churches, we're pretty lousy when it comes to loving each other, despite what our church websites might tell the world. Now, don't raise your hand. In fact, just kind of sit on your hands for a second. I wonder, though, if there's anyone in this congregation who has ever had a problem with another member of this congregation. Like I said, keep your hands down. It would probably be easier to ask it the other way, wouldn't it? Is there anyone here who hasn't had some problem with somebody else sitting in one of these pews? Is there anyone who hasn't had a squabble? Yeah, you keep looking around like you're having trouble. Now, we all have those moments. Those moments when Paul's words from Romans don't really last in our lives. When we can hope for them, but we find that we are indeed not living up to them. And that's why in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus addresses things from a different perspective. He doesn't just say, oh, love each other, you'll be fine. Instead, he gives very practical advice. It's really a three-point plan. Point one, if you got a problem with somebody, talk to them privately. If that doesn't work, then we're on to point two. Take along a couple of folks that you both trust. And if the person that you're quarreling with and you can't reach resolution, then move on to point three. Tell it to the church. And if that person still doesn't listen, well, then you can treat them like a Gentile or a tax collector. It's easy, right? I mean, it's too simple even to put in a self-help book. That'd be one page long. You wouldn't make much money with that one. Talk to the person privately. Take along a couple folks as witnesses. Tell the church. And if that doesn't work, treat them like a Gentile or a tax collector. But we don't do that either, do we? I've got to tell you, as someone who has been involved in church from the time I was, little, I have seen more conversations that take place, not between the two people who have the issue with each other, but with two other people. Oh yeah, let me tell you about Mabel and what she did. Mabel is okay. I'm not picking. Do we have a Mabel here? We don't find many women named Mabel anymore. We need to bring that name back for little baby girls. But yeah, we always pair off and we talk about people instead of to people. And that's where we go wrong to begin with. Because those side conversations never bring about resolution. Instead, they divide the church. They bring factions into play, because then you get the pro-Mabel faction and the anti-Mabel faction. You get the people that talk amongst themselves, and those who are excluded from the conversation. How are we ever going to fix things if we can't even follow point one of the three-point plan? But let's just assume that we did. That we talked to Mabel and said, Mabel, let's work this out. And Mabel, she's going to be tough. And that's when we take along a couple other people, maybe a couple deacons, maybe someone who sits on the Sunday school board, maybe someone who's on the outreach committee, people that are trusted and well-loved, whose opinions are respected. To be witnesses, to be there making sure that maybe I'm hearing what Mabel's saying just as much as Mabel's hearing what I'm saying. We do that all the time too, don't we? No, not so much. I don't see a single person nodding. No, we're still back there in the parking lot. We missed point two also. And I guess that probably means that we never make it to point three either. When we can get together as the congregation, as God's people, united in time and space, and start to say, people of God, we have a conflict here. Mabel and I, we can't get along. We can't settle this. We need your help. And when you tell Mabel that she's wrong, well, you might tell me I'm wrong, mightn't you? Maybe that's why we don't do that so much. It's because we're afraid of what the community will tell us. Maybe they're telling us that we need to listen instead of that other person. But let's say that it is Mabel indeed who's wrong, because I'm the preacher today. So Mabel's wrong in the church. You tell her that she needs to change her ways, and she still refuses. We've run through our 3 points. And so now we're free to treat her as a Gentile or a tax collector. And sometimes churches are pretty good at that one. We've skipped all the points leading up to it, but man, we're ready to turn our back and say the heck with you. You've seen it, haven't you? We all have. Churches, we don't do it formally, but we do it informally. But there's a problem with that too. Because even though that's step 4, we don't pay attention to what it means. Treat them as a Gentile or a tax collector. Well, remember how Jesus treated Gentiles and tax collectors? He ate with them. He went to their homes. He talked with them about the realm of God. He treated them as God's very own children. And so we mess up point 3.5. When we take a remedy that excludes. So maybe what we need to do is to rethink the whole thing. To go back to what we're told there, to engage in those one-on-one conversations, to deal with conflict by saying, as a brother in Christ, as a sister in Christ, I value you. Let's work on this together. Let's settle our differences as family. Let's then settle those differences, if they're still out of hand, by bringing in more family, more loved ones, more people who love us both and want what's best. And finally, if it turns into one of those all-church discussions, that only ever happens at the annual meeting, I know. But if it turns into one of those all-church discussions, let's approach that in love too. Because, well, we're all Gentiles and tax collectors, aren't we? We're all of those who have been welcomed into the fold from outside. And then let's go to the table together. Because when we come to the table, when we share in that Passover meal recast by Jesus, when we take our little piece of bread and our little cup of grape juice, or wine, however we do it, we're saying something not only to God, not only to the person who hands us the tray, but to all of the world. We're saying that we are indeed family, breaking bread together. Let us then share in this different kind of meal, united by a love so strong that it unites us across even our squabbles and our fights. Let us come to the table laying aside everything that divides us and clinging tightly to everything that binds us together. For the love of God known to us in the love of Jesus is more powerful than even our own personalities. Thanks be to God.